Hi, I wanted to do a quick check-in to go over your annotations and your discussion posts for this first reading. I want to kind of try to show you where you're at and then push you a little further to deepen your analysis and to kind of better comprehend where we're trying to go and give you some advice for the kind of next um, set of kind of assignments and readings that you'll have to kind of get you to go a little deeper than where you went so far. Um, so trying to understand the concept like intersectionality is complicated. So just kind of keep in mind that when we're learning a new idea, there's always like these little pieces. So some of the pieces will make more sense to you, and other pieces will be kind of not so clear to you. And over time, hopefully, you'll be able to put those pieces together. So we want to see some of those pieces and try to make the connections. And some of those are justice, fairness, identity, which are definitely the pieces that we want to be focusing on in intersectionality. I also want to have you think more deeply about the emotions and the words you're using to express how you're understanding these topics as we're going to go through them to help you figure out new ways to talk about them. So if I just start at the baseline of, what are our feelings about justice, identity, and intersectionality? There's lots of strong emotions. So the most common were anger and confusion, some for surprise, and then even love. And love tended towards the ideal of justice, whereas anger and confusion is to kind of like, why is injustice happening? Surprise is more directed at like just something you didn't know or you didn't realize that it was something as common. And so I think what we see is that, like I kind of said this before in your introductions, is that you have entered into criminal justice because you care deeply about fairness. And so now here you are reacting to perceived injustice about the career that you're trying to go into. So I think some of you might have had a bit of a naive idea that the career you're going into is the thing that fixes injustice. But here you're going to see that injustice is here as well. And so this is going to be an emotional process you have to go through to be able to put these pieces together to figure out what you're going to do about it. Um, it's not surprising. This is very common in the research when people are thinking about rights or they're thinking about the legal system. That anger comes up in response to uh, you want things to be a certain way, justice should be fair, but then they're happening. Humans are not, and so you're responding to this ideal, and that makes you angry. That's very very common. The confusion shows that you're trying to the simple explanations that you see on TV, the news, or in day-to-day conversations aren't matching the reality based in the new information, the academic information that you're receiving. And so the confusion is, evidencing that there's a difficulty there. Um, Maybe a little like insecurity about like how do I proceed if I don't have access to this information. The surprise is again pretty kind of like I didn't realize that it was this bad. I think is a good way of wrapping up kind of what you all mean when you're confused. I'm sorry, when you're surprised. So the difference between confusion and surprise is confusion is like not sure what to say about it, and surprise is like, oh, I can't. You're getting it, like it's sinking in, but you're not sure what to say about it. Um, and so this is the right place to start because this is where you can build from. So then if I look at your words, and I choose nouns, verbs, and adjectives because that's the most um, basic parts of a sentence structure that you've all been taught in elementary school and then are being retaught or reminded of in your English 12 class. And the adjectives are useful because it helps us better understand what we want the system to be like. The nouns is telling us what we think the system is, and then the verbs are what you want the system or what you want the noun to do. And so this is connected to your emotions, and that starts to form pictures in your mind of what you think the legal system looks like or should look like or is. And so that's very useful when we're trying to get you to think more deeply about the problem. So a lot of you, when you think about the legal system or you think about intersectionality, the way you're talking is you're talking about individuals. Uh, Whereas this class is focused on the judiciary, which would be a collection of individuals, otherwise known as groups. Uh, and so, right, we're trying to get you to move beyond just individuals to see how social structures, how groups are actually the things, to use your language, right? The noun that's constructing the system that is not fair. And so instead of saying like the system isn't fair or the person isn't fair, you're trying to say that people actively make things unfair. And that's what we're trying to get you to see. So when you're using individuals or you're saying like that person, I kind of already know you're going the wrong direction. And so I know that your metaphor or the way you're seeing the picture is not quite right. And so we have to try to add to that picture. Um, so we want to start thinking more about how identity is constructed by a system, and that affects people through these interactions that are shaping what people believe justice should be or shouldn't be. So I know it's hard to accept emotionally, but when an injustice happens, that's also indicating to the people in the system that something needs to be fixed, that everything isn't perfect. It doesn't mean they're going to do it, but it sends the signal. So the injustice happens, it says, okay, look, this thing's broken, and so it needs to be fixed. Now those people have to make the decision that they're going to fix that thing or that they're going to address that injustice. But I want you to think about if the people in the system are like you, and they don't see the system or they don't see social groups and they're only looking in individuals, they're never going to change the system. And so one of the disconnects you're having is like, why don't the people in the system change the system? Well, maybe they're seeing it like you. Maybe they're only looking at individuals and they're trying to change individuals. And you're not going to change a system by changing individuals because the system creates those individuals. And so you're going to have to change the system. And so that's what we're trying to get you to look deeper beyond individuals, to start seeing that it's not, experience is important. Don't get me wrong, but it's a signal that there's something worse going on. So it's kind of like a symptom of like a cancer, right? And so if you're just treating the symptoms, you're not going to do anything about the cancer, and so you're never going to feel better, right? And so that's why we're choosing this approach to help you get deeper. Um, so the metaphorical structures that you're kind of using in your responses um, is like a broken, corrupted machine, maybe a weight or a burden, or a battle or a struggle. And so you want to kind of think about, which of those metaphors best represents how you think you see. Like if you close your eyes and you can visualize the system, or how you feel about the systems. Does it feel like it's a machine that can't ever seem to get fixed? Does it feel heavy? Does it feel like something that's weighing you down? Or does it feel like you're in a fist fight with it? That's a very good starting point to kind of think about moving up or moving deeper into the analysis. And so to do that is this second to last slide here is, again, instead of seeing it just as the individual, the kind of part on the left that's in the circle, you have to remember that the circle also overlaps with the interpersonal. So how you understand and get along with other individuals. So that kind of relationship is also a part of it. So you can't just focus on individuals because it takes two. But then there's also institutions like the court system, like the police, like the corrections officers, um, like even the education system, right? Even this classroom, right? These are institutions that have a set of norms and behaviors and expectations that you either start to modify to and you start to become like that, or you resist those things. And so your individual experience is shaped by your kind of compliance with those institutions or your resistance to those institutions, and often in ways that you're not quite fully conscious of or aware of. And so that's what gets us to this other part of structures where, as you repeat, let me give you a very simple example, and I'm not picking on anybody, but a lot of you, several of you, not a lot, actually, just a few of you, in your responses on the discussion board said, I agree with such and such. You didn't invent that. That is something that most students will do until a professor like me tells you to knock it off. And I think you should already figure out why, right? Um, but you're not really adding anything to the conversation. You're not really putting that much effort in to just say I agree or I disagree. Um, and so now that you've been told, and then you get another chance to do it, or you could go back and fix the first discussion post. Uh, the repeated interactions with me and professors like me who are asking you to dig deeper and to really apply your learning, you'll start to change as a student. You'll start to engage in those dialogues. And I can only say it this way: as you engage in those dialogues, you will get smarter. By saying I agree or disagree, you're not getting smarter, and you're not evidencing any understanding of the material. But once you start trying to engage, and there's several students in this class that are already doing it, and so I would look at their examples, is they didn't start that, they didn't start perfect or like super smart. Uh, it's because they're engaging, they're wrestling, they're struggling, they're thinking, they're showing their skills as they're going through the material, and they're applying it, and that's what's helping them better understand the material. And that's really what separates kind of like an A student from a C student. And so that's just something to think about as you go through. So I gave you this is a form of legal reasoning that would help you, which you need to understand for this course and legal courses, called a syllogism, and it's got three parts. It's got a major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion. And this is how the Supreme Court writes as well. Really, how all lawyers write. So we start with the big premise, the big topic, the big point, which is that all legal systems, regardless of whether you're in the United States federal system, if you're in New York, if you're in New York City, if you're in China, if you're in Russia, it doesn't matter. All legal systems, due to their structures, their inherent structures, the thing that makes them them, and the categories that are inside of them, so like case, law, judge, jury, right? Those categories, those all function as a distorting lens that systematically filters and obscures the unique harms experienced as a turbulent confluence of intersecting oppression. So what turbulence is like when you're in an airplane, you get those bumps. Okay, so the intersecting oppressions of race, gender, class, right? Those are the bumps. And so let's say the court is going along, and then it experiences the signal of, look, people are experiencing these injustices. Well, here's the dilemma that you're having. You want them to fix those injustices, but they're just learning that they exist. They then have to distort that. They have to distort that experience into a legal way of thinking. And I'm trying to get you to do that right now through this exercise, right? So they have to take it and then turn it into a major premise. So if you just want them to fix the problem, they can't, because they're looking at it through a legal way. So like if healthcare is going to fix the problem, that's not what the court does. They're not a healthcare provider. You see the dilemma there? So then the smaller idea, that's the big idea. The smaller idea is, for example, a low-income transgendered person of color, by virtue of navigating that space of those difficult turbulence, they themselves are inevitably going to face a legal system that perceives them as different, as the exception, as a one-off, as something they don't really have to do anything about. And so this is kind of what allows the hateful rhetoric and kind of the things you guys pointed at as the injustice, is because the court doesn't recognize it as a common problem. It sees it as a unique problem. And so it's not going to address the issue for that reason. And so the conclusion is the legal system will consistently misrepresent, or often even just erase, specific injustices that individual faces or other people face, because it's a game with rigged rules. In other words, it's a game with rules that are on their like written down or neutral, but they're written by people who have already got a strong position in the game. And so they wrote the rules to the game to help them win. And so then the people who repeat those rules and get better and better at that game are going to win every time. And those people are always going to be rich business people, corporations, because they're constantly in and out of court. And so they're getting lots and lots of practice. Whereas this individual who's going through these turbulent injustices finally got the court to recognize one of their injustices, but they barely even know the rules of the game. And then so the whole rules of the game are going to be used against them from start to finish, and it'll be a miracle if they can even finish the game, let alone win. And so it's very, 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 very unlikely that they're going to win. But there's other reasons for persisting. But I'll make you go to my law and society class for that. But there's other things that can happen besides just winning within the legal game, because it's just one game, right? There's other games you can play. But to kind of understand this now deeper is that it's a systemic problem. It's not an individual problem. So for the rest of your assignments, what you're going to want to do is, instead of thinking about identity as like a stack, so it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, think of it more as, you know, we're using the turbulence metaphor here, right? So the air of each of the things, race, gender, and class, is all coming together to create this storm, right? And so the storm is the thing that it gets recognized by the court. But the court tends to separate each of the things and treat them as unique, as things that don't happen very often, even though that's not true. But it's not the way that the legal way of thinking about it. And so it's hard for the legal system to kind of understand it the same way that, say, a sociologist or a philosopher could understand it, or just the person experiencing it, right? You don't even have to go to school to understand that those three things affect where you are in society, as several students said. Instead of thinking justice as a broken machine that does things to people, individuals, think about it as a distorting lens or a filter. It's a thing that changes the perception. So, you're seeing the problem as one thing and here's how to fix it, but the legal system sees it as a different way. And they'll most likely not be able to do the solution that you'd like it to focus on because of the way they think about the problem. And then instead of thinking about privilege as a head start, or like a run, like you're either ahead or behind, you need to think it more as like the people who wrote the rules of a rigged game. And so that's kind of a way of thinking about relational power. So I have control over you because I know the way that the legal system works, let's say, as opposed to a grade challenge or an attendance challenge or things like that, right? You probably don't know those rules. And so just my advantage of knowing them is where you were thinking about as a head start. But now also imagine that I'm the one who gets to write the rules. And so let's say the professors get to write the rules, which is more or less true, for attendance and these things, then you're right, you don't really stand a chance because the game is rigged against you, which can be very depressing, right? Which leads to kind of the, again, going back to the emotions, but it should also kind of key back to that anger of saying like, well, that's not the way things should be. And I totally agree with you. The professors should not be the ones writing the attendance rules. And there should be a professional ethics for professors, right? And so then like we could be on the same page of saying, okay, now let's make changes to the system as opposed to just complaining about one individual professor. But this will help you understand a deeper kind of way to express yourself, but also to connect back to the things that you already know and you feel. So it's not that you're wrong, right? It's just that we got to get deeper. We got to move on to for a stronger analysis in order for this to be an academic experience, as opposed to just us hanging out and chatting about our opinions.